And we begin this morning with discussions going on right now to keep 5 senior Taliban leaders from returning to the fight. The Obama administration released the so-called Taliban 5 from Gitmo last year in exchange for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. Bergdahl now faces desertion charges, and the U.S. and Qatar have agreed that the Taliban 5 would not travel with restrictions, but those restrictions expire tomorrow. A deal is now reportedly in the works to extend the restriction for another 6 months. Joining me right now in an exclusive interview is the former Prime Minister of Qatar, Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jaber Al Thani. Good to see you, Sheikh Hamad. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Maria.
What is your sense? I mean, the U.S. nearing this deal with Qatar to extend that travel ban. What is your sense of these 5 former prisoners now still in Qatar and whether or not they will leave and go rejoin the fight?
Well, first of all, I'm talking in my behalf, not in my government. As you know, I am not in the government. But I think this deal, when it's been reached in a mutual agreement between Qatar and the United States and the Taliban. And it was, at that time, trying to help both parties to reach an agreement in the prisoner. And also, as you know, there is a political talks happen in Qatar between Taliban and the governments, how they will find a way to sort the problem in Afghanistan, especially as you know, United States is most of their troops is now outside Afghanistan. What is clear to me, first of all, is the noise which it happens. This agreement being done with the United States, as you know, Qatar respect the agreement and put these people, and at that time everybody thought that this is a good deal for everybody and it's a win-win situation. Right now I hear a lot of criticism about this deal. Criticism which we are surprised for in Qatar as a normal person, as an ordinary person, that this deal being done to help. And now it seems that if we did not help, it is better for me that we don't have that noise. I know there is a discussion happening at the moment, as we hear from the news, and I think there will be an agreement between Qatar and United States and Taliban how to extend or have a new arrangement for these 5 Taliban.
Is there a feeling from the Qatari side that these 5 represent a big threat to the world? I mean, how much of a threat do you think these 5 represent?
Well, from the beginning, before we go to the threat, we went, this problem is to solve a problem. And the problem is to get the prisoner back, your prisoner, to get him. Yes. And the second thing is also to keep them in a safe place where you can guarantee that they will not behave or go back to what they are doing before. This has been done. And this has been reached, and now the end of the 1 year is after a few hours, as you mentioned.
Tonight.
Yeah. So, in my opinion, agreement is important to reach. How they will behave or how after they leave, this is something which we don't know how they will behave, because you cannot guarantee somebody else after he leave a jail, even if in the United States, what he will go and do the same things back or not.
Of course, of course. Sheikh Hamad, I want to get your thoughts on the broader policy coming out of America, foreign policy, as it relates to Yemen and Syria. So stay with us. We've got a lot to talk about with you, the former Prime Minister of Qatar. But first, let's take a look at the Taliban 5, the renewed fear that they will return to the battlefield, and the questions over whether the prisoner swap was one of the biggest mistakes President Obama has made yet. Fox News' senior correspondent Eric Shawn joins me now live with that angle. Eric, good morning to you.
Good morning, Maria, and good morning, everyone. How will they behave? Well, they will be back killing Americans. That, at least, is what critics predict will happen if the so-called Taliban 5 are free to travel after their 1-year travel ban expires just hours from now, tomorrow. But reports say the ban may be extended for at least another 6 more months.
It is true that the United States has been in touch with our partners in Qatar about the kinds of steps that we believe are important to protecting the national security of the American people.
They were described as high-risk, hardcore. The 5 former top-ranking Taliban officials, among them the chief of staff of the Taliban army, the head of communications, and the deputy of the Taliban intelligence service. They were held in Gitmo for 12 years, and it was predicted that they would return to the battlefield if ever released. But then came Bo Bergdahl. President Obama made that controversial and highly criticized decision to swap the 5 for Bergdahl 1 year ago. Bergdahl, of course, captured by the Taliban after walking away from his platoon, charged with desertion, and has been branded a traitor by some critics. When they were swapped, the Taliban 5 were sent to Qatar, living there, says the government, under surveillance and monitoring. But despite that, at least one of the Taliban 5 was reported to have contacted al-Qaeda, which, of course, was not part of the plan. We're told that the 5 have been living in a residential compound in Doha, joined by 70 family members from Afghanistan. For now, they may not be going anywhere, but the question remains, what happens when the day comes that they can? Maria?
And of course, that day is today. Eric, thank you very much. More now with former Prime Minister of Qatar, Sheikh Hamad, joining me this morning in this exclusive. And Sheikh Hamad, I'd like to get your sense of really what's happening right now with ISIS controlling 50% of Syria, with ISIS having taken down Ramadi in Iraq. Characterize the war against ISIS and what's been going on this last year in Yemen as well as Syria.
Well, I think there is turmoil in all the region, and I think this is still in the beginning. I don't think we reached the peak in the region. There is a mess, and this mess is because of 40 years of bad policy in the region. Most of the region have bad policy for 40 years. We have dictatorships which stayed 40 years. They most think about themselves, how to stay in power. They did not talk about job, about development, and that's what we have. If we are talking about ISIS, we have to talk why it happens. It happens because of bad policy of our ally in the United States, in my opinion. You know, the control of the Iraqi governments, the way how it's been done, I think it shows that there is the Sunnis have not fair treatment with other ethnics or with the Shia in Iraq, and all of them Iraqi, they have to have same opportunity. And I believe this happened after feeling that they've been insulted or they've been pressured or been kicked out of the power completely. And unfortunately, ISIS find the right moment and the right, what we call it, atmosphere in the region, and it happens. In my opinion, to fight ISIS, there is 2 or 3 elements. The first elements, we have to know the problem, why it's being caused. ISIS will not be strong if we dealt with the problem in Syria in the first year or the first 8 months. And at that time, Bashar almost done. Now we are dealing, we know that ISIS have some arrangement with Bashar al-Assad in certain times to create a new situation in Syria and to show you that there is the alternative of Bashar is terrorism. I think if we dealt with the problem more seriously, I mean the United States especially dealt with us in the region more seriously. In Syria problem, the first 10 or 12 months, I think we will not see ISIS. And also if we dealt more seriously in the problem in Iraq. Right now, to deal with the matter, United States cannot deal alone. All the region have to work in this. And to work in this, that means there should be an involvement to get rid. But part of this involvement, how also to give the Syrian people their freedom from Bashar.
Should the U.S. have pulled out all of the troops in Iraq? I mean, it feels like that was one of the seminal moments that really empowered ISIS.
I think it happens before you pull your troop. ISIS was there, not enough strong, but it was there because, in my opinion, during your stay, during your troop, yes, you can dealt with it militarily, but politically, I think there was a lot of mistakes which bring ISIS to the picture.
Do you think at this point we will see a change in strategy? How do the Middle East right now, our allies in the Middle East, feel about America's foreign policy? What would you like to see done?
I think there is a shock and surprise from the policy, to be frank. You know, I consider myself friend of United States. And I think there is a shock among even the friends of United States how they dealt with the matter, how they are trying to find solution after solution, mistakes after mistakes, I call it. And even when you are talking with Iran, for example, for the nuclear, I support to have a deal with Iran in the nuclear. But to support Iran in the nuclear, you have to have all the region with you before Camp David. You have to have them with you from day one to support this deal.
Sheikh Hamad, before we go, I've got to ask you about this soccer corruption and FIFA. Let me switch gears, insisting that the Qatar 2022 World Cup will go ahead. Can you give us a sense of how the process has gone on in terms of Qatar getting the World Cup? There's all this talk about FIFA and these under-the-table deals.
Unfortunately, it's not fair talks. Even if you see how they talk about Russia and they talk about Qatar, I support, of course, Russia to have their turn in the 2018. But if you see the talks, it's all about Qatar. Is it because an Arab Islamic small country? That's the people in the region feel. I think if you think about the opportunities and to bring the Middle East and to bring the Arabs closer to you, I don't think this attack will help. Because my knowledge that we dealt with this in a fair competition and there was no corruption in these things. But the problem is the media insisting, as there is somebody trying to flare this between time to time, and we know why they flare this. We know how to distinguish this flare. But I believe that shows the ugly face of the other party when they did not win a fair competition.
Sheikh Hamad, it's really terrific having you on the program today. Thanks so much for talking about so many important subjects of the day.
My pleasure.
We will see you soon. Sheikh Hamad is the former Prime Minister of Qatar.